You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk. And before we get into what I need to talk about today, I have to make a couple, for lack of a better word, corrections. One is a correction and one is just more of a quick note. I'll do the quick note first. I had no idea that the Hockey Hall of Fame was announcing who was going to go in yesterday. If I did, I'd have sold it yesterday. Like, hey, I'm going to react to it. I seriously had no idea. I think I found out at like 3:30. And they announced who was going to go in at 4 o'clock. I mean, what a terrible job of publicity. If you knew, God bless you. But I didn't. I mean, I'm obviously going to react to it now. It just bothered me that I didn't know until, like a half hour before the announcement. Terrible job of publicity by the Hockey Hall of Fame. Now moving on to the correction, which actually goes with the Hockey Hall of Fame. I was looking at Doug Wilson's Wikipedia page. And I noticed that Wikipedia had him as a 7-time All-Star. But HockeyReference.com, which is what I use for Mount Rushmores, had him as a 3-time All-Star. So, something's not adding up. I scrolled down to the bottom of the Hockey Reference page, and sure enough, it says 7 All-Star games for Doug Wilson. So now, I'm really confused. I click on the thing that says 3-time All-Star, and it says 3-time NHL All-Star Team. So, basically what that is it's really unknown. Very, very few people care about this. It's basically the NHL version of an all-pro team. It rewards the best players for that season. And that's how they have Doug Wilson as a 3-time All-Star. He didn't play in the All-Star game 3 times. He was a 3-time member of the NHL All-Star team, which is different. So, basically, every Mount Rushmore for hockey, and this ticks me off, because this is just stupid. Every Mount Rushmore for hockey, when I mentioned the guys' All-Star games, I was wrong. And it's funny, Joe Sakic should have been my first clue. I said that Joe Sakic was only a 3-time All-Star. That didn't sound right when I said it, but Hockey Reference is a legitimate website. It's in the Sports Reference family of websites. Who am I to disagree with them? It's their job to know that. Well, you scroll down and you see that Joe Sakic actually played in 12 All-Star games. Not 3, like I stupidly said. So I'm really sorry about that. The one thing I'll say in my defense is that HockeyReference.com needs to change that. Alright, I hope you'd agree with that. 3-time member of the NHL All-Star team. Not a 7-time All-Star Game participant. In fact, you don't even have to change anything on the graphic. Just change the number. Who the hell cares about the NHL All-Star team? We care about the All-Star Game. It's different. In fact, if you took this out of context, 99% of people wouldn't know what on earth I was talking about. It's the single stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Alright, I hope the people in charge of HockeyReference.com hear this. They need to change that. That is so blasted dumb, I can't even begin to explain it. Alright, that's my rant for the day. Or one of my rants for the day. You know me, I love to go on rants. My doctor hates it because my blood pressure goes through the roof, but whatever, it's entertaining. I'm 23 years old, I'll worry about my blood pressure later. It's a problem for future, Jacob. Man, I'd hate to be that guy. It's a line from The Simpsons. Okay. On to the Hockey Hall of Fame. I'll go in alphabetical order, starting with the players. The first two, Marian Hossa and Jarome Iginla, are obvious. I don't think you could disagree with it. Marian Hossa has over 1,100 points. He won 3 Stanley Cups. He actually made the Stanley Cup 3 straight years. 2008, 2009, and 2010. You want to hear something crazy about that? He made it with 3 different teams. In 2008, he made it with the Penguins. 2009, he made it with the Red Wings. In 2010, he made it with the Blackhawks. He's the first and maybe only player. I don't know if he is the only player, but I think he is. Don't quote me on it, though. To make the Stanley Cup Finals 3 straight years for 3 different teams. It's pretty interesting. There were some people that were surprised that Hossa got in his first year. You know, when he played, this is what they say. He wasn't the most dominant player in the league. He only made 5 All-Star games, no bold type. When he played, you thought he was one of the best players in the game, but you didn't think he was the best. There were a lot of people that thought he was going to have to wait a few years. And I understand that argument, but when you have over 1,100 points, 500 goals, and 3 Stanley Cups, you're a first ballot Hall of Famer in my eyes. If your argument is that there are more deserving candidates that have waited longer, so put them in now, I understand that. But in a perfect world, I have no problem with Hossa being a first ballot Hall of Famer. Then again, a lot of people that are currently out of the Hockey Hall of Fame should have been first ballot Hall of Famers. I'll get into that a little later. Jarome Iginla, no one can argue with. 600 goals, incredibly dominant, one of the best players in NHL history to never win a Stanley Cup. It's kind of funny, he's on the Flames Mount Rushmore, and he's on the Mount Rushmore of best NHL players to never win a Stanley Cup. That Mount Rushmore is Marcel Dion, Mike Gartner, Iginla, and Dino Ciccarelli. It's one of the biggest travesties in the history of sports. SB Nation did a great video on why Iginla never won a Stanley Cup, so check it out. No one can argue with Iginla being a first ballot Hall of Famer. Oh my god, no Stanley Cups, blah blah blah. 600 goals, and a 6-time All-Star playing in Calgary. you're a Hall of Famer. Kevin Lowe is really interesting to me. There are a lot of people that are really happy that he's finally making it in. It took him 20 years to get into the Hockey Hall of Fame. I'm serious. He was on the ballot for 20 years and he finally got in. The Hockey Hall of Fame needs some kind of rule like the Baseball Hall of Fame where players fall off the ballot after a certain amount of years. I mean, if you wait 20 years to get into the Hockey Hall of Fame, you're probably not that deserving of a candidate. Although the Hockey Hall of Fame is one of the better Hall of Fames in sports. Basketball Hall of Fame is dreadful. Baseball Hall of Fame is okay. The Hockey Hall of Fame and the Pro Football Hall of Fame are really, really good. The thing with the Hockey Hall of Fame is there are just a lot of people that aren't in it that should be, but that's because of their bylaws. They allow a maximum of a really small amount of people to get in each year. And I don't like that. We have such a backlog of players that need to be in the Hall of Fame. Just remove that mandate, for goodness sake. I'll get into it when I get to Doug Wilson, but I want to talk about Lowe. A lot of people are happy that he's finally in. I know that Stan Fischler has been preaching his case for a while. If you don't know, I used to work for Stan Fischler. The guy did not treat me well. I really have no respect for him. It's kind of funny. I noticed in my office that there's a book of his. And right when I saw it, I took the book and I just threw it clear across the room. It's like, nope, I don't want anything of his in my office. But the one thing I'll say is Stan does know a lot about hockey. The guy's forgotten more about hockey than most people know. So him saying that Lowe belongs in the Hall of Fame does mean something. I disagree with him, but it is a good endorsement to the people who think they know him but don't. My dad thinks that Lowe should be in the Hall of Fame. That's a much better endorsement. I understand why people are preaching Lowe's case. 6-time Stanley Cup winner, 5 with the Oilers, 1 with the Rangers, played in 7 All-Star games. On those Oilers teams with Gretzky and Messier and Curry and Coffey, Lowe was probably the second best defenseman on those teams, behind Coffey. And on the 94 Rangers, Lowe was the third best defenseman, behind Sergei Zubov and Brian Leetch. If you wanted to put Leetch ahead of Zubov, you can. I understand that Lowe was a really, really good player in his era. But 431 points. That's his total. He was a physical player, tough player, played the game the right way. You watched him play, he was a really good player. You knew that. I knew that. Really good shouldn't get you into the Hall of Fame. I understand 6 Stanley Cups. I get that. 431 points, though. That's not a Hall of Famer. 7-time All-Star. Great. Fantastic. Look at the total body of work. This guy doesn't even have 100 goals to his name. Now, he's a plus 260 for his career. He was a defensive defenseman. I understand that. But you've got to be a fantastic defensive defenseman. You've got to be elite to be a defensive defenseman and make it into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Kevin Lowe was not elite. Kevin Lowe was never the best player on his team. How can you put a guy like that in the Hall of Fame? Kim St. Pierre is one of the greatest women's goalies in the history of hockey. She's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist, a 5-time IIHF gold medalist, dominated in international play, absolutely dominated. I have no problem with her being in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I know it's kind of short, but I don't follow women's hockey that closely. I just know that St. Pierre was an incredibly dominant goalie. She deserves to be in. I'm really happy for her. It's been kind of recent that the Hockey Hall of Fame started putting in women. And it's really good that they did, because some of those players like Haley Wickenheiser, Cami Granato, and Angela Ruggiero, regardless of gender, are incredibly dominant. They should be honored as such. Good job by the Hockey Hall of Fame in inducting St. Pierre and all deserving women. Back to Doug Wilson. A lot of people have been banging that drum for a long time. And I understand why. Wilson was one of the best defensemen of his era, won a Norris Trophy in the 81-82 season, 7-time All-Star, has over 800 points. There was a guideline that some people followed that said if you have over 800 points, you belong in the Hall of Fame. I get all that, but Wilson to me is just a borderline candidate. I don't have a problem with him being in. If you're borderline and you make it in, okay, fine. You know, I'm not one of those people who says, if I have to think about it, he's not a Hall of Famer. I don't really buy that argument. You know, if you don't know enough about a player, do some research. I don't have a problem with Wilson making it in. What I have a problem with is a borderline candidate making it over, in my opinion, clear-cut candidates. The thing about the Hockey Hall of Fame, and this needs to change, they don't release their ballots to the public. The only articles out there are people predicting who's going to get in. So we don't see the full ballot. It's not like baseball or football. I mean, that really needs to change. But I'll go through some of the people who aren't in the Hockey Hall of Fame right now. And you tell me if you think they're better than Doug Wilson. In my opinion, all these guys are better than Doug Wilson. Daniel Alfredson, Alexander McGillney, Rod Brindamore, Curtis Joseph, Jeremy Roenick, Shane Doan, Patrick Eliash, Theo Fleury, Chris Osgood, Keith Tkachuk. All those guys are more deserving candidates than Doug Wilson. You want to tell me, Jacob, you never saw Wilson play live? You don't know how great he was? No, nonsense. I do know how great Doug Wilson was. Like I said, Doug Wilson was one of the best defensemen of his era. I'm not saying he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. What I'm saying is, those guys that I just mentioned are more deserving candidates than Doug Wilson. And if you agree with me, then let them all in. Enough with the crazy limits that they have. There can only be 4 male players elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame each year. That's it. Just 4. I named more than 4 just now that should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And in 2021, you have the Sedin twins, Henrik Zetterberg, and Patrick Sharp. The Sedin twins are locks. You can make the argument for Sharp and Zetterberg. Just remove the limit. Either raise it to 10 or get rid of it entirely. Because we have a lot of deserving candidates for the Hockey Hall of Fame that are not in. That's a joke. The Hockey Hall of Fame did put in someone in the builders category. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's Ken Holland. This guy definitely deserves it. One of the smartest minds in the history of hockey. 4 Stanley Cups with the Detroit Red Wings as an executive. I mean, he was a huge reason for those cups. Won 3 of them as GM, 1 as assistant GM. Very, very deserving of this induction. And I think he's going to lead the Oilers back to the promised land. Not an easy thing to do after what Peter Chiarelli did to him. I'll tell you that. Moving on to baseball now, and there was a really sad death in the baseball world. One of the more underrated people of the late 50s to mid-70s, and that is Eddie Kasko, who died yesterday at the age of 88. It's okay if you don't know who Kasko was. Like I said, not the most household of names, but this guy was a really good player throughout his career. He never hit for a lot of power. His career high in home runs was 6 in 1960 for the Cincinnati Reds. And he also never hit for great average. Again, his career best was in 1960 with a .292 average, and he retired with a .264 average. But what he lacked with the bat, he more than made up for in defense. I'll go back to 1960. He led all NL third basemen in fielding percentage that year. And in 1964, as a shortstop, he led all National Leaguers in fielding percentage for that position. I mean, let me tell you, there's a role for that. It's okay if you're not hitting 300 or you're not hitting 30 home runs or even 20 home runs. If you're a .260 hitter and you're playing great defense, fine. I have no problem with that. You've got to compensate for it in other parts of the lineup, but there's a role for you in this game. In 1961, Kasko made his only All-Star teams. In 61, there were 2 All-Star games, so Kasko is credited as a 2-time All-Star, but it was all in 1 year. I've said this before, I don't know why Major League Baseball did that. It's really stupid, it messes up a lot of things. But regardless, Kasko was a 2-time All-Star. He made 2 All-Star games by the rules at the time. Good for him. And that year, he was not great with the bat. He only had .271 that year with 2 homers and 27 RBIs. He made it based on his defense. Can you imagine a player now making an All-Star game based on his defense? This is the obvious statement of the year coming up. Defense in baseball is, without question, the most underappreciated part of the game. Either that or having good at-bats. After making those 2 All-Star games, Kasko made the World Series. Unfortunately for him, he was going up against one of the best baseball teams of all time, the 61 Yankees, and the Reds lost in 5 games. But Kasko played well in that series. He hit .318. Out of every Cincinnati Red to play in all 5 World Series games, Kasko had the second best batting average behind Wally Post. He also continued his stout defense by only making 1 error in 27 chances. I'll fast forward a little bit. He retired after the 66 season and immediately became a manager for the Red Sox's AAA team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yes, there actually was a baseball team called the Toronto Maple Leafs. It no longer exists. 67 was their last year, so Eddie Kasko is the answer to a very obscure trivia question: who was the last manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team? He followed the Red Sox's AAA team to Louisville. He went 500 in the minors, made the playoffs once, but that was enough for him to take over for Dick Williams as Red Sox manager. Now, Dick Williams was a really, really good manager for the Red Sox. Never finished with a losing record, won the pennant in 67, came very close to winning the World Series that year. That series went 7 games, but Bob Gibson in Game 7 was fantastic. He pitched a complete game, only gave up 3 hits, 2 runs, 10 strikeouts. Like I said, he was insane. So Kasko was immediately behind the 8 ball. Here's a 500 manager in the minors taking over for a guy who never finished with a record below 500, and just 3 years ago led us to the pennant and came within 1 win of a World Series victory. But Kasko, to his credit, was a really good manager for the Red Sox. Like Williams, he never finished with a below 500 record. In fact, the least amount of wins he had in a season was 85. Unfortunately for the Red Sox, in Kasko's 4 years as manager, the Red Sox were only in contention once. That was in 1972. They finished a half game behind the Tigers for the AL East title. You're probably thinking to yourself, how could a team finish a half game behind a team for first place? Well, in 72, there was a players' strike. It wasn't a long one. It lasted less than 2 weeks. Basically, it was about pensions and salary arbitration. But what the owners and players decided to do was just write off the games that were missed. What are the odds that it really comes back and bites us? Well, wait a minute. 6 to 8 games, of course that can come back and bite you. The last series the Red Sox played in 72 was against the Tigers. They were a half game behind them in the AL East. So, whoever wins this series wins the division and gets to lose to the Athletics in the playoffs. The Red Sox lost the series. In the first 2 games of it, they only scored 2 runs. And because of that, the Red Sox finished a half game out of first place. Unbelievable. After the 73 season, Kasko was reassigned to be a scout for the Red Sox. He was in that role for 20 years. And he's credited with discovering Roger Clemens. 18 players were taken ahead of Roger Clemens in the 1983 draft, including such immortals as Stan Hilton, Jackie Davidson, Ron DeLucci, and Rich Stoll. You really gotta wonder what those teams didn't see in Clemens that they saw in their actual draftees. But Eddie Kasko was a great baseball mind, good player, really good manager, great scout. May he rest in peace. Alright, it's time to recap the San Francisco 49ers 2020 NFL Draft Class. We're getting there. We're almost done with this thing. It's going to take me probably a little over 2 months to get it done. But hey, I was able to give you content throughout this pandemic. I'm really, really proud of that. I didn't love what the Niners did. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. They wanted to trade down. Entering the draft, they had 2 firsts, and then they didn't pick again until the 5th round. Now, that's not the end of the world. They were the 2nd best team in the NFL last year, so you can live with that, but it's still not ideal. And Lynch wanted to move down, but he only moved down 1 spot in the 1st round. He picked up an extra 4th rounder, and then he used that pick to trade up. It was a bizarre draft for the Niners. Very, very bizarre. And I didn't like what they did with their first pick. Nothing against Javon Kinlaw. I loved Kinlaw coming out of South Carolina. Yeah, he didn't jump off the tape, but he's a jack of all trades, master of some. He has a perfect frame, 6'5", 324 pounds, incredibly athletic. He ran a 5.05 40, and he plays quicker than that. Really good against the run, really good against the pass. Tough player, durable player. What I didn't like about that pick was the Niners just spent a bunch of money on Arik Armstead. They already have Nick Bosa. And they traded DeForest Buckner to clear up room on the defensive line. Solomon Thomas is also okay. He's not great, he's not terrible. I've heard some people call him a bust. He's not a bust. He's just not worthy of the 2nd overall pick. But he's not a bad player. The Niners had bigger needs. They had a glaring need at wide receiver after seeing Emmanuel Sanders leave in free agency. Jerry Jeudy was right there. How do you not take him? CeeDee Lamb was right there. How do you not take him? Nothing against Kinlaw. A defensive line of Armstead, Bosa, Thomas, and Kinlaw is going to terrorize opposing quarterbacks for years, but they had bigger needs. They did fill it with their next pick, though. They traded up to take Brandon Ayuk. I don't mind that. The Niners were rumored to have wanted to trade down, like I said. They ended up only trading down one spot, and then they traded up. Alright, fine. You know, I can't get too upset about that. And I like them trading up for Ayuk. They needed a wide receiver. Ayuk was a guy whose stock skyrocketed all throughout this process. He was a guy who was viewed as a potential third rounder. His stock kept going up and up and up. He was ranked 24th on my big board. ESPN had him at 23. He ended up going 25. So by Price is Right rules, I won. Ayuk is a jack of all trades, master of none. He's really projectable. This is a potential pick. He's not a guy who's going to come in and dominate right away. But in a few years, watch out. The sky's the limit for this kid. He does everything well, but nothing great. Colton McKivitz was an absolute steal in the 5th round. This is a guy who I had an early to mid 4th round grade on. He jumped off the tape at West Virginia. 4-year starter. Smart player, tough player. Not great in pass protection, not great in run protection, but he can get there. There are some people that have said he's going to have to make the transition from tackle to guard to succeed in the NFL, which is perfect for the Niners because they needed a guard. As it stands right now, their starting right guard is Tom Compton. As someone who has seen Tom Compton play, saw him a lot for the Jets. That's not good. It wouldn't surprise me at all if McKivitz started instead of Compton. Really, really good pick by the Niners. Charlie Werner was an undraftable prospect to me. I just don't think he has the skills necessary to succeed in the NFL. Bad blocker, bad receiver. I like his bloodlines. His speed is okay, but his arms are incredibly short. He gets bullied when he's trying to catch passes. I just don't think this kid has what it takes to succeed in the NFL. And to make matters worse, the Niners already have George Kittle. They really needed a cornerback. They could have taken a cornerback here. Whatever corner they wanted would have made perfect sense. Not some guy who I wouldn't be surprised if he never played a game in the NFL. Jawan Jennings was a solid pick as a 7th rounder. Some people had him as a borderline undraftable prospect. I knew that someone was going to take him. He played really well at Tennessee last year. Almost 60 catches for just under 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. Yeah, he doesn't have a lot of experience at wide receiver. He was a high school quarterback, made the transition over to wide receiver, so he doesn't have a lot of tape there. But I love this kid's fire, really good ball skills, not the greatest speed in the world. He ran a 4.72 40, but it's passable. I like Jennings a lot. I don't mind the Niners double dipping at wide receiver. All in all, I have to ding the Niners for only having 5 picks. 2 of their picks I really didn't like. Nothing against Kinlaw, but he didn't fill a need. And Charlie Werner, I, again, wouldn't be surprised if he never played a game in the NFL. Because I like their other picks a lot, and because they were the second best team in the NFL last year, John Lynch has earned the benefit of the doubt. I was debating between a B- and a C+. If it was any other team, I'd probably give him a C+, but I'm in a good mood today. I'm going to give him a B-. Alright, it's time for another Mount Rushmore. We're on the Edmonton Oilers now, and this one is really, really easy. If you disagree with this, you're wrong. Just plain and simple. You're wrong. The correct Mount Rushmore is Wayne Gretzky, Yari Curry, Mark Messier, and Grant Fuhr. Do you need me to tell you anything about them? Do you really not know? I mean, come on. Wayne Gretzky's the greatest player in hockey history. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. When he was traded, alright, this is how dominant Gretzky was. When he was traded, the Canadian Parliament tried to void the trade. Unfortunately for Oilers fans, it couldn't get done. Yari Curry was probably the best teammate that Gretzky ever had. Nothing against Luc Robitaille, but I'll take Curry over him. This guy held his own playing next to Gretzky, 5-time Stanley Cup winner, 8-time All-Star. The best way to describe him would be a much, much, much better Evgeny Malkin. Mark Messier gave the Oilers the necessary depth to compete. You can't just have a great first line, you've got to have depth. And Messier was a great second liner, won a Conn Smythe Trophy for the Oilers when they beat the Islanders in the Stanley Cup. He won a Hart Trophy for the Oilers, made a bunch of all-star teams. Incredibly dominant player. My uncle is a big Rangers fan, and I told you that he's on the front lines in Jersey with COVID-19. His wife and children bought him a cameo from Messier. And it was really, really classy what Messier said about him. Really nice guy. I just hate what he did for the Rangers in '94. I'm still not over it. And Grant Fuhr was one of the best goalies of his era. Yeah, when you look at his stats now, they don't jump off the page. An .887 save percentage and a .338 goals against. But this guy finished in the top 6 in Vezina voting 7 times. He won it once. 6-time All-Star, 4-time Stanley Cup winner. Without question, the best goalie of his era. Fuhr's the easy choice here. It's not Glenn Anderson. It's not Paul Coffey. It's not Esa Tikkanen. It's definitely not Kevin Lowe. It can be Connor McDavid. In fact, it probably will be McDavid 5 to 10 years from now, but he's not there yet. In fact, Draisaitl may get there soon, but like I said, not yet. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that when Derek Jeter dove into the stands, it should have been seat cushion night.